Welcome to the Path Monk Presents podcast. My name is Sean Donnelly Lewis, and today I'm talking with Alan Gleeson. He is a B2B SaaS marketing consultant for workwithagility.com. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Delighted to connect and looking forward to chatting to you.
So, work with agility. Aside from working with agility, what else do you guys do?
Well, there's a little kind of clue in the name. So AG is my initials for a start, and agility, I guess, is what I do, right? So I'm a freelance marketing consultant specializing in B2B SaaS. It's an area I'm really passionate about. So I think it's sort of very much the agile model whereby you typically get B2B SaaS companies looking to grow, but they probably can't fill out their C-suite because maybe they're pre-Series B or the cash flow isn't sort of at the level to kind of fill out the C-suite. So I essentially work as the head of marketing or the chief marketing officer in an agile model. So it's almost like a SaaS model itself. You can turn me on or turn me off. And I typically support fast growing technology companies in the UK and Ireland in the marketing function.
Great. So obviously the clientele built up. How have you come to this place? Just thinking about getting to where you're at and the expertise that you have.
Yeah, so I guess I've been interested in SaaS. I mean, I go back to when there was 56K dial-ups, right? And I remember selling software when it was boxes, where I was selling it into retail and we were spinning it off a CD-ROM, right? So I've always been passionate and very interested in SaaS. And of course, the ecosystem in Europe is a few years behind the US, but it's still, fast growing. And I guess I'd run head of marketing functions for a small number of B2B SaaS companies in Europe and sort of realized that, it's a very long journey and it's a very bumpy one and sort of, there's lots of bumps in the road. But I'd learned huge amounts from the number of companies where I was full-time. And I thought, actually, wouldn't it be great to run a smaller portfolio? Because I could see the kind of appetite for, agility and sort of, not having a full-time in person in the role. So I guess two things. One is, word of mouth. So a lot of my initial clients were word of mouth. So people that I knew in the ecosystem and heard of stuff I'd done. And secondly, I've done quite a lot of blogging, writing, stuff, challenges that I encountered with my clients, obfuscating the data, right? So it wasn't clear who the client was, but just sharing lessons from, my learnings, and sort of that sort of helps then raise awareness and bring me leads, I guess.
And so acquiring new clients, what role does the website play in all that?
Well, you laugh at the moment. There's a message on the hello bar saying I'm not accepting any clients at the moment. So, so I'm going to be one of your unusual guests, right? So my personal side is, or my company side is closed, right? I'm not scaling up right now because it's more brochure right at the moment, because I think it demonstrates, my content is there. But what I will do when we get into the show in a minute, I can talk about some of my clients and sort of their growth journeys, right? Because obviously I'm wearing a couple of different hats today, Sean, and one of those is as the head of marketing of a number of fast-growing kind of B2B SaaS companies. And again, the recipes for those are very similar. We're trying to generate leads. Word of mouth virality is obviously key, because when you've got a great product, it makes life a lot easier. And then we're doing things like content. I tend to be very sharp on SEO, so trying to do content that's very much SEO orientated. And then paid acquisition, Google Ads and LinkedIn would be typical platforms we'd use to try and generate some leads. But again, we can dive in a little bit more detail when we get into it.
Yeah. So when you're working with these people, right, what do you think? Is there been a pattern with things that people focus on when it comes to improving their website or their online presence? With actually just sticking with the website for a second, what have you seen the most? Usually people wanting to improve converting the customers or the quality of leads, user experience. One of those three, which one of those do you see the most?
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone wants to grow, right? So they're all looking at leads, and of course leads, you're getting into MQL versus SQL, and you're getting into the kind of quantity versus quality debate. I mean, part of the context is in Europe, there's, I consider it a much more resource constrained environment compared to the abundance you get in the US, right? So what I mean by that is, many of the US equivalents are better funded. They've got more people in the team. They can afford better tech stacks. So, in Europe, it's trying to move the lever, but often the the levers aren't quite as malleable as the US, right? Where, as I said, you've got, it's easier to do more when you've got more people by and large in the team, and you raise more money. And that I think is fairly evident so then it becomes, there are 1,000 things to do. What are the 2 or 3 that we can narrow in on? And content is obviously always there in the back of people's minds. Content is tough though, right? Because I think, you will see a lot of people pushing content to more junior people to write, but they're not really understanding the SEO elements of it, the amplification that you need to do with content when it's published. So content is often where people focus because, of course, it's perceived as being free. But I think I see it done badly in lots of places. So I usually will do a content audit and try and set people on the right path with that.
Very interesting. Yeah, I do see that a lot. I see that you're right. The content is being written by somebody who, yeah, like you're saying, can actually be cheap labor in a way, right? But actually viewing it as a reasonable source of income. Just
Well,
coming back.
here's the difficulty. Sorry, Sean. Like if you're trying to write to C-suite, you need, like, if you're trying to appeal to, say, C-suite level to, as the enterprise buyer in some instances, with all due respect, a 25-year-old isn't probably going to be able to write like a seasoned CEO that understands at a thought leadership level what are the kind of key strategic issues. So I think that's part of the disconnect.
Yeah. So coming back to what you do, just for everyone listening, yeah, this is going to be a strange thing because you're a consultant. But why don't you just talk about what you do differently, what you pride yourself on in your work that helps you stand out, I think, a little bit more than some other people in the same space.
Yeah, I mean, I think the passion underpins everything, right? And it's a quality that I guess that you either have it or you don't. And for whatever reason, I like B2B software. I find it kind of interesting, right? So I think that does inform, my background. So I'm a voracious reader, right? So I do consume lots of SaaS content and sort of, I'm always trying to learn more because I think it's a very complex arena, right? I'm going to almost contradict myself here now, but there's no apples to apples, right? So you almost have to read content and then put it through the lens or the filter of your own experiences, right? And I like that challenge. I guess the other kind of part of my DNA, for want of a better phrase, is what I'd call continuous improvement. So again, not a major idea, but just constantly looking for small improvements on a continual basis in terms of the people I work with. So do they learn more? Do they understand more? Do they test more? Do they constantly look at sort of improving? And I guess they're the 2 elements, plus I guess the experience. So one of the benefits of my model, I guess, is having done this for so long, I've been with companies that have exited. I've been with Series D level US companies looking to break into Europe. I've done it with bootstrapping startups that are, nickel and diming to try and make payrolls. So I guess there's some of the kind of elements that I bring to the table.
Just thinking, well, this is one of my favorite parts of the show where I get to pick your mind as a marketer, as a consultant. So what would you say is the biggest marketing challenge when I say a word like innovation?
I guess the biggest challenge is with innovation is resource constraints, wearing a European hat, right? So like there's always these pressures to kind of make your lead velocity and make sure the quality leads are there. And if you've got a small team, there's a very heavy draw to that, right? And it kind of erodes your kind of ability to be as innovative as you'd like. So that would be one of the kind of thoughts I'd have on that.
So when I say ROI, return on investment, what would you say would be the biggest challenge in marketing?
Attribution and sort of, again, we can be seduced with, wow, attribution is fairly straightforward. And it may be if you've got a team of 10 or 15 and you're running the most amazing tech stack, but if you're faced with a marketing function with 2 or 3 in it, and in some instances even fewer, that ROI piece can be quite challenging because, attribution can be a tough nut to crack. It sounds straightforward, but it's not. Believe you
Sure.
me, not.
Yeah. And say one more. When I say conversion optimization, what do you think is the biggest challenge?
Conversion optimization. Yeah, I guess part of it is the kind of the marrying of sales and marketing. So you can have conversions firing as white paper downloads when actually they're probably not. So it's for me, it's around that feedback loop. So often, marketing can deliver, leads into Salesforce or another CRM, and sometimes in a busy world, the feedback loop isn't there. So you're not really sure as to which are closed won and closed lost. And, so that's some of the challenges in that.
And just keeping with this marketing theme, if you could only focus on one thing to improve the overall marketing process, what would it be? Would it be the road mapping, growth initiatives, messaging, reporting? Which one of those do you feel like is the thing?
I mean, it's a great point. I mean, you're putting me on the spot with picking one. I mean, I do like what I'd call unit economics, right? So I do kind of like, this focus on reporting. And again, it's very nuanced, right? And, you go to Google Analytics, for example, and you're looking at deriving data from that. You got to apply lots of filters, because if you don't apply filters, you'll make bad calls on the back of bad data, right? So I think reporting is nuanced, but it's critical. And of course, when you have a good understanding of your core fundamentals around, conversion rates and kind of lifetime value and cost of acquisition, I think it does help you make better decisions.
Just switching gears here a little bit, I wouldn't mind talking about you as a leader. You talked about being a voracious reader. I think that's the word that you said.
Yep.
But what kind of content do you consume to educate yourself and grow as a person and as a professional?
Yeah, it's a funny question, right? Because I'm torn between, do I want to get into the weeds and read the latest update on, optimizing the latest Google Analytics version coming out and the latest changes in SEO? And actually, I don't, right? I really want to be going more, more C-suite level, right? So I kind of, try and stay as much, I try and get a mix of those. So part of it is understanding the macro, environment. So I read The Economist. I find, keeping abreast of kind of the macro environment very important. And then, Avanish, Occam's razor is, I can't speak highly enough of that, and you can put it up in the show notes later just to get the details correct. But that's my go-to for weekly consumption of, data and reporting and analytics. I think, he's the most brilliant writer, and that's my go-to, along with others. I run Pocket, so I've got a Pocket app on my iPad, and I'm clicking on Firefox during the day, saving articles, and then I get to read them in the evening. Yeah.
Okay. No podcasts or any other forms of ways or ways that you educate yourself?
Yeah, I mean, the podcasts, they're backing up at the moment, right? So when I was
Right.
commuting into the office, I was, listening to lots. So Scott Galloway in the US, I always find very interesting. There's an economist in Ireland, David McWilliams, getting back to the macro kind of stuff. He's very interesting. And apologies, my background prior to marketing was economics. So I still kind of, I'm an unusual marketer in that sense. I'm sort of, my primary degree was economics and marketing, so I do kind of do tend to kind of listen to both. So and then people like Neil Patel, I guess, or would be someone I'd listen to when I get a chance. But no, commuting at the moment, podcasting has definitely suffered.
Right. Just since we're slowly coming to the end of the interview, I just want to jump into our rapid fire questions. So just short and sweet.
Yeah,
I ask the question and you be as honest as possible, right? Honesty is the best policy. So,
sure. Why
Alan,
am I
what was
getting nervous? I'm getting nervous now.
are you what's the last book that you read?
Atomic Habits.
Oh, I actually just read that as well. All
Oh,
right,
good.
very good. Um, what's the single thing that your company is focused on at the moment the most?
Growth.
If there were no boundaries in technology, what would be the one thing you'd want to have fixed for your company today?
Attribution.
What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about your company?
Oh, that's a good question.
Obviously, you could say, you know what, you sleep well, or I have people
Well, I
that
do.
say,
I do well. I think I'm at the age now where I try not and get stressed about stuff. So I'm batting you there. I'm not kept awake. Now, some of my clients might listen in and say I should be, but I'm sleeping easy at the moment, Sean.
if you were to start, let's just say your professional journey, if you were to start your professional journey over again, what would be the one piece of advice you give yourself?
If I was to start my professional journey again, You put me on the spot on that one. I think being curious, so maintaining curiosity and sort of um, maybe I haven't always been as curious. So sometimes, I think that's probably what I would be, just a little bit more curious, and maybe do some courses that weren't linked to marketing and economics. So probably try to have a few other interests that were professionally weren't kind of economics and marketing.
What would be one of the courses then? What would be kind of the hobby sector?
I don't have a lot of time at the moment, right? I'm a rugby coach in a sporting capacity, and I'm a fairly avid sports follower. So I guess leadership. So there's some interesting stuff around leadership being done at the moment. So often it's actually coming from, like Stuart Lancaster, who's a former England rugby coach who now works in Ireland, is doing some interesting stuff. So that's probably one area to look at.
Very cool. That was Alan Gleeson with workwithagility.com. Alan, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I just want to give you the last word. So what we do is when we have our guests on, they could either sum up everything that we talked about, or if you feel like there's something we've forgotten, I just want to give you the last word today. The floor is yours.
Murphy's Law, the internet dropped for 10 seconds there, but I think you were saying to sum up. So I guess, look, enjoy the conversation. Hope you found it of interest. I guess, look, if you're on this career, you got to be a voracious reader. You got to learn. You got to be careful that apples to apples doesn't always translate in software. So do read lots, but always try and filter it through the lens of your own particular context. Be that, what stage of the business is, what resources you have at your disposal, what the skill set in the team is. And I guess prioritization is probably my last thing. So we've covered a lot of ground. There's only so many hours in the day. So being really ruthless on having a mechanism to prioritize and sort of, ensure then that you're focusing on the most important things. I think that's a key point that I probably left out.
Thanks for being on the show today, Alan.
Thanks so much for having me on, and I hope your listeners find it of value.